right, so we are here with NateNeuman once again at City Hall. So I was interested in just talking with you again a little bit about the projects that you're working on in the community and the impact that they will have, upon completion. So if you wouldn't mind just starting off kind of explaining again some of the projects that you're working on right now.
Absolutely. I think one of our principal projects is the Northland Corridor redevelopment, acknowledging a stretch of the east side with a high concentration of vacant former industrial lands. Some of the structures, other are just brownfields without improvements. The intent is to create a business park that will be able to lure employers into the neighborhood and supply jobs and other opportunities for neighborhood residents. That really starts with the creation of a workforce training center that will train many neighborhood residents, particularly youth, for these types of jobs. Going forward, over the next several years, there'll be a lot of retirements in manufacturing. And of course, manufacturing has become more skill intensive, and we just don't quite have the ability to train for all those skills right now locally. But the intent of the Workforce Training Center is to do exactly that. And again, emphasizing that employment on neighborhood youth that otherwise wouldn't have access to those jobs. So hard skills will be taught as well as soft skills. I think it's worth noting that many of these industries are being geared toward not just advanced manufacturing, but renewable energy. Some of these other high-tech areas that we're really trying to build up these clusters locally. That is also being done in conjunction with a neighborhood revitalization strategy that I'm heading up here for Bureau. And that's just examining ways that investment can trickle down into the surrounding streets, blocks, neighborhood, and so forth. So this project isn't done wholly within a vacuum.
Okay, cool. So I don't think I actually got to this question last time we spoke. What is your drive to be this involved in the community, be this involved with Buffalo? Like, why Buffalo? Your slogan and literally everything you send out is what, for God, country, and Buffalo. Like, why Buffalo?
Yeah, Buffalo first and foremost is my home. And I think that weighs very heavily on my soul. If we can't be loyal to our home, aside from family, I don't know what else we could really be loyal to. So growing up here, I just naturally developed an affinity for my community, for its people, and it would probably be true no matter where I'm from. If I were from somewhere else, I'm sure I would be equally as loyal and passionate about it. But I think in Buffalo, these unique circumstances of having been a great, wealthy city at one point and fallen on such hard times really is motivating. Buffalo isn't an obscure place. It was one of the great cities of America at one point. It was an arsenal of democracy. We hear that said in conjunction with Detroit or associated with Detroit, but Buffalo is very much the same. We produced, goods that allowed for the good guys to win the war. The good guys won the war because of cities like Buffalo, and I think that's really, really important. We're also a huge source of innovation. A lot of things were invented in Buffalo. So very rich history, and that urbanism that we have here in the city, I think, is inspiring too. We have very good bones. It's a very walkable city. It's a city that has pretty good transit access, a city that is blessed with waterfront and, of course, its Olmsted Park system. And I just think for that to just for us to allow that to just, fall through our fingers like sand as the city perpetually declines is just unacceptable.
So would you be able to kind of speak on this this idea of the new urbanism, just this sentiment that is, I honestly want to say a little bit generational. Our generation is really embracing this idea of bringing everything back to the city. would you mind just, kind of talking on that a little bit?
Yeah, new urbanism is a reaction. It's a correction to our flawed field, our flawed discipline or practice over the past half century or more. Planners throughout the 20th century did not fully understand nor appreciate urbanism in its true form, its traditional form.
Mm-hmm.
And we had, streets and buildings that were truly magnificent in their own right, that ultimately were allowed to perish so certain conveniences could be achieved, mostly with vehicles. And that became the doctrine. It got to a point where we knew nothing else. That was the norm. And we didn't know how to teach or practice any differently. We had these beautiful buildings, these beautiful public spaces and streets, but they were just like a weird anomaly, like they were out of a history book. And the new urbanists came along and they said, we could still have that. We could still do that. All right, we have to teach ourselves how to do it again, but we could do that. And I think this was done, it's pretty good timing in that this new millennial generation comes around and they say, I grew up in the suburbs. I was carted around in my parents' car from school, soccer practice, and everywhere in between. But I don't know if I want that lifestyle. Cities are cool. They're eclectic. They're exciting. They're culture. They're fun. They're interesting. Cities are interesting. And I like walking because it's enjoyable. It's good for me. It's good for the environment. But I enjoy it first and foremost. And they understand that cities provide incredible levels of character. So you have this fine-grained urbanism, right? One block can house a dozen or more businesses on narrow storefronts, probably significantly more than a dozen. And with interesting housing types and variety, spaces for all types of businesses and businesses. From an artist loft with making a sculpture to sell, that's their profession, to a marketing firm, to almost anything. And so new urbanism recognizes that our current practices, or our practices over the past 50, 70 years, essentially forbid that. And they make it incredibly difficult to do through really horrific zoning, through separation of land uses, through no emphasis or understanding of form and its relationship to the public realm and itself, other buildings. The urbanists really sought to correct that. And I think that's been a driving force in the movement. And we've seen other planning groups adopt new urbanism. Right? The conversation is being had at APA today. This was unthinkable 15 years ago. It was unthinkable. Mm-hmm. And now, APA has pretty much adopted CNU's agenda going forward. You see that with ULI. ULI and APA were tremendous antagonists of cities and good urbanism several generations ago. CNU kind of came along and just, recharted the trajectory of the ship.
Okay, cool. So I guess, part of this movement now and just, literally being on the ground running with everything that you're doing, how do you envision Buffalo, let's just say, in 10 years?
Buffalo has made a tremendous amount of progress. We could see that. It's evident. I grew up in the city, so I was no stranger to downtown as a kid. I went to high school downtown. I worked downtown in college up until now, so I see a lot of this. I see how far we've come. I don't see why Buffalo still wouldn't be in a very positive position 10 years from now. I think that we need to be very careful. We need to tame our expectations a bit. There's certain key ingredients that the city doesn't have, and that's not going to change. We don't have a dominant corporate presence in Buffalo that could finance a lot. Detroit's rail system, for example, is being almost overwhelmingly privately financed. Private business is funding their rail system for the most part. I think it's got some public share, but that's astronomical. Mm-hmm. The High Line in New York City was a recipient. I forget what the breakdown was, but it was a recipient of tremendous amounts of private investment. And in Buffalo, it's a little bit more difficult for us to do. So I think that we will continue to grow. We will continue to prosper. I don't see why that would change. I I think our economy is pretty well suited for the future. We have a lot of knowledge-based industries, from manufacturing to other white-collar professions. We're producing talent, and we're doing a very good job of retaining talent. The brain drain in Buffalo is over, and it's actually been over for some time now. Buffalo's problem is that it's still not attracting people. So we could retain, but it's difficult for us to recruit. And that's really got to change. It's really got to change. I think you'll see the continued reactivation of neighborhoods in the city. I don't think we're going to cure much of our blight and poverty in only 10 years. I think that's going to be a generational effort. But we will make progress, especially in certain clusters. And I see continued progress on the waterfront, man. I mean, just in a very short period of time. I bike and I walk the waterfront all the time. I don't just go down for a concert. I try to really get out there and project myself along the waterfront. Excuse me, that was impossible 5 years ago. These trails weren't there. And there was very few of them, but they weren't connected or in poor shape or whatever. But that's all very new. And you're seeing incredible amounts of private investment along the waterfront, from warehouses on Niagara Street being adaptively reused, to apartments and breweries, to sports and entertainment functions along the Buffalo River. Now you see new housing on the Buffalo River. The Outer Harbor continues to be one of the most premier public spaces, I think, in the Great Lakes. And we've barely tapped its potential. Barely. So you'll see a lot more of that. If there's one area of Buffalo I am not concerned about, it's this waterfront. I think the waterfront will do very well. I think the economy will still grow, but just not as an accelerated pace like we want it to. But a lot of things could change. I did not anticipate the Buffalo Billion, for example, until Governor Cuomo announced it. And I think that the jury's still out of the Buffalo Billion, but again, that was unexpected, and that was a major infusion of money into our region.
I'll ask this question later. It's a little off for everything, but okay. So the public spaces that you in your office are, creating. One of the things that, I know I'm personally very invested in is just this idea of bridging community with government, bridging community with the university, bringing all the resources together so that there's this wonderful balance of input. When you talk about a place like Canal Side or the Outer Harbor, what goes into that planning process to make sure that it is accessible to community, not just a specific one, but the broader community? I mean, I've noticed, when I go down to Canal Side or when I go down to the Outer Harbor, I see everybody. There are people from different neighborhoods coming down, enjoying different venues. That's something that's very new for, the city. What kind of goes into making that happen?
Well, I think you got to look at downtown and really the central core of the city. Downtown is everyone's neighborhood. It belongs to everyone. All right, from east side to west side, from north towns to south towns. It's everyone's neighborhood more than any other single place in the region. That's true in most cities. It's, all roads led to the center. That's where there were common markets, the exchange of goods and services and even ideas. So downtown is a very inclusive place. You have so many different types of businesses. You have different types of residences. You have different types of retail and restaurants. And of course you have the greatest concentration of accessible and inclusive public spaces. All right? Multiple public squares and parks and, wharfs. So Canal Side will continue to be diverse and inclusive for no other reason than its location. That is the one part of Buffalo's waterfront that is truly downtown, more than any other location. That is the one section that is truly downtown, which again is everybody's neighborhood. Which heightened its importance for redevelopment, and I think we finally did it. Lighter, quicker, cheaper was a good thing, because if we had built a giant store right in the middle of that, most of that wouldn't be publicly accessible. So we got the right idea. We need some buildings there. All right, it's an urbanized waterfront. It was always envisioned to have residences, space for employment, retail, and shops. Excuse me. But we're getting there. And I think that's development buildings are really essential to connecting the canal side into the rest of downtown. But the outer harbor is a little more difficult because it's just not as accessible. In all honesty, you just need a car to get there. Now, we've done some things to mitigate that. The bike ferry is magnificent. I use it all the time. The trails along Ohio Street, I've rode them, got at least a handful of times this summer to get to the outer harbor. But you pretty much need a car to get there. So you won't see that level of diversity and inclusion on the outer harbor. Not like a canal side. And I think other areas of the waterfront, as they come up, they'll still be a little bit more regional to that area of the city. Scajaquada Creek, I think a lot of that infrastructure will still be used, for the most part by neighborhood residents, but not exclusively, certainly not.
Very cool. So just like a final question, it's been what now, a year since you graduated?
Yeah.
Having the experience that you do, if you were to give advice to any soon-to-be graduate about going into the field, what would you share with them?
I would say, do it because you're passionate about it. Urban planning is not a get-rich-quick type of field, and frankly, that's okay. A lot of us do it because we're really passionate. We love cities. All right, we're driven by urbanism and design and architecture. It's our obsession. We think about it every single day, every moment of the day. It's ingrained in who we are. And then we found our passion being, in this case, Buffalo, because it's our city. It needs help, and it's a magnificent place with incredible levels of potential. And I think that can be stated about so many cities, right? But especially these Rust Belt cities, they're legacy cities. They have such rich histories and incredible heritage. So find something that really drives you in planning. Really want to do it. Don't just do it because you didn't get accepted into architecture school. I mean, you should be a planner for more reasons than that. So you need to love the field. You really do. I need to be inspired by something in the field.
One follow-up question to that. While they're in school, what is one thing that they can do, or maybe a few things they can do to get ahead?
Get involved in the community. That was hands down the greatest point of my success, both undergrad and grad. I was very involved in the community. Pick a group or two and get involved with them, join them, participate with them, and get to know and understand your community, even if you have no intention of staying in Buffalo. That's okay. I had a friend who came to Buffalo for his MUP. He was from Connecticut, and he got an internship at the Elmfield Association and became so involved in the neighborhood, loved the neighborhood. I mean, just was almost driven to tears when he had to leave. And he still comes back regularly. I wouldn't put it past him that he'd want to ultimately return to Buffalo, even though he's not from here. But he just got super involved. I have an intern, from Iran, who just got really involved in so much of what we're doing here in the city. And she was just constantly going to meetings and participating in all these events. And Buffalo's almost become like a second home to her. So whatever you do, get involved in the community. All right. It might not even be urban planning related, and that's okay. But do not silo yourself on campus. I think that is just a tremendous mistake. Get out there in the community, find a cause, a purpose, fight for it, participate with it, or in it, and your college experience will be so much better. I promise you, it'll be so much more fulfilling.
Fair enough. Cool. Thank you. All right.